Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel, where I talk about all things natural dyes and share natural dye tutorials with you. I recently asked a question on Instagram about what tutorials you all would like to see from me, and eco printing with blankets was a big request. So this is one of those things that seems really complicated, it seems really scary, but it's really not. It's a really basic idea and technique, and it can be as creative or as straightforward as you make it. When it comes to eco printing and other natural dye techniques, there's a lot of differences. So with eco printing, there's just a lot of variation. There are many people who use these same techniques in different ways to achieve different results. And a lot of times there's no right or wrong. It's more so just figuring out what you like and how to get the results that you're wanting. Whereas when you're doing an immersion dye pod, a lot of set best practice techniques that you want to do. Whereas with eco printing, it's more experimental. Anyways, you get the idea. So before going into the actual tutorial, I just want to touch on the terminology, because if you're out there reading about eco printing, you might hear blankets being called carrier cloths. Then there are different types of blankets. So you have dye blankets, you have iron blankets, you have tannin blankets, and that's just referring to the different things that you put on your blankets. So the material stays consistent. And I have a basket of blankets that I like to use for eco printing. They are just fabric. That's what a blanket is. You want a cellulose fabric. Usually you want something that's absorbent, but something that's not going to put too much moisture onto your print. Because if you're wanting to create those clear, crisp prints, too much moisture is going to muddle them. So a thin cotton flannel is a great blanket. This is just an old receiving blanket that we used when my son was born. And it's a great carrier cloth or blanket. I also just tend to use a lot of my scrap cotton. Just thin cotton. If you want something to be thicker, you can always use two pieces together. So like if I am doing something and I want a bit more of the dye to be available, I often just fold it or layer two pieces together. You will notice that a lot of times most often actually, your blankets are going to get some print on them. And this is because they are sandwiching the plant material. So you're going to have your target cloth, which is where you're going to lay your plants, and that's the piece of cloth that you are trying to print. So let's say you're trying to print a t-shirt. Your t-shirt would be your target cloth. You're gonna put your plants down, and then you're gonna put your blanket right on top of those plants. So it's likely that some color is going to transfer onto your blanket. And you can see that here with these iron blankets. I mean, you can't see that. I will show you. So now you can see some color has really transferred. Get this darker onto this, and that's even after washing. I keep these printed iron blankets separate. I do reuse them. You risk the chance of some of this color transferring onto whatever you're printing. I just throw my blankets in the washing machine between use, so I get as much of the I get as much out as I can. Then you'll also notice if you're going to use a carrier cloth for a dye, you're obviously going to have a dyed piece of fabric. So this one was a madder root carrier cloth that I used, and it's pink still. You can see some of the prints transferred. You can see it's still pink. It's been washed. Blankets should be unmordanted. The goal is not for the blanket to hold on to the color. The goal is for the blanket to transfer the color onto your target piece of fabric. So even unmordanted, because madder is the type of dye that it is, it really dyed this fiber pink. So I use this specifically for madder root, or if I was doing another pink dye, I could also use it for that as well. Or if I wanted to get creative and mix dyes, that might be fun too. Sometimes I keep my carrier blankets because they just turn out so pretty, and they're almost as pretty as the original print. So this is a great example of one that I just decided to keep because I love the print on here. Let me get the color right for you. So this was a matter blanket I used on a coreopsis print. And it's just so pretty. There was iron involved with this, and we'll talk more about that. So you can see that with the iron and the madder, when it came together with the coreopsis stems, it made this crazy cool purple, which almost looks like veining to me. I just think it's really neat. So I used this carrier blanket to make these prints here. The last one I showed you had iron involved, so you'll be able to see the difference, and I'll take a side by side so you can see too. This one has no iron involved in the print. So we'll talk a bit about mordants. I'm in the process of making a whole course about eco printing, so I can't cover everything about eco printing in one YouTube video. So in eco printing, just like when you're doing other natural dye techniques, a huge part of your success and your results is going to come down to your choice of mordant. My preferred mordant for eco printing is a mordant process that leaves no color behind on the fiber, and I share it exclusively in my online course. I like to use that mordant technique with iron for my eco prints. However, there are lots of options, and I'm going to show you a few examples of how the different types of mordants you choose are going to affect the types of prints that you get. So aluminum mordants pull the bright colors, the bright cheerful colors out of a plant. They're often not going to grab onto the tannins in the plant as much, they're going to grab onto the other dye constituents. So this is a hemp leaf that was done with just aluminum mordant. And then this coloration here is it's from a dirty rod that I used to roll this print, but you can see it's bright, it's cheerful. This was also a hemp leaf that I used just an iron mordant on. It's a little duller, it's sadder. I don't have an example of just the two together without a blanket, but this is the cool effect you can get when using an iron blanket. So this is a piece of fiber that was treated with an aluminum mordant and then printed with a hemp leaf with an iron blanket on top. So you get this really beautiful purpley gray background when the iron interacts with the tannin, and a lot of times that's what you're trying to achieve with eco printing. You're wanting those tannin iron reactions to take place. Another example of the same technique using leaves. You can see the iron blanket picked up the prints really beautifully. So here you have the reaction from the aluminum in the plant itself, and here in the background you have the reaction of the tannin and the irons. It's so fun to experiment with eco printing. The possibilities are endless, really, and once you start mixing things and trying new techniques and developing your own techniques, it just becomes really fun, and sometimes you end up with some results that really surprise you. Here's an example of some leaves I just printed with iron. So this fiber was just treated with iron and then printed with leaves. So you can see it's darker, it's sadder. There was no aluminum to pull out those bright greens. So in my demonstration today, I'm going to be showing you 3 different possibilities. I'm going to be using coreopsis flowers because it's coreopsis season here. They're one of my favorite eco printing flowers, and I don't have a lot of fresh eco printing leaves available to me right now. I also wanted to mention, if you were wondering what is mordanting, what is she talking about, I have an online self-paced full-length course where I cover everything from the pre-treatment of fabric, which includes mordanting, all the way through dyeing, modifying colors with different after dye, post modification techniques, and caring for naturally dyed fibers. So it takes you from the very beginning of the process, step by step, all the way through to the end. I've also taken that full length course and broke it into mini courses to make it more accessible and more affordable. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, check that out. I always link it in the description box below. So I'm going to be showing you a piece of fiber that has been mordanted with tannin and aluminum and an iron blanket and the reaction that you'll get with that. Then I'll also be showing you two other pieces, one that I'll make with an iron pre-dip and one that I'll make without, both using a matter blanket. So you can kind of get an idea of just some of the possibilities. But like I said, these are just a few possibilities when it comes to eco-printing with blankets. Before getting started, I just want to say if you feel like I'm moving too fast through this tutorial, I have a full-length how to eco-print tutorial that I will link below. So to get started, I have some exhausted madder root dye that I've actually used for my carrier blankets the last 2 or 3 times I've eco-printed, so I'm not feeling like there's a whole lot left in this, but madder is one of those dyes that just keeps giving and giving, so we'll have to just see how it goes. I have a bowl of iron water. It's ferrous sulfate I used today instead of ferrous acetate. It's very weak. It's probably, well actually it's not very weak. I would say I made this at about 3% weight of fiber or more, so it's medium weak. It's kind of, I kind of just experiment with iron water every time. Often I use 1% weight of fiber or less when I am shifting colors and modifying colors when I'm doing immersion dyeing, but I found with eco-printing a bit stronger iron water really gives better results. I have some coreopsis flowers that I picked from my garden. They're actually really dwindling, so I like to usually use the leaves and the stems, but we're just gonna work with what we have. I have the pieces of cotton that I'll be using for my blankets. And I have some plastic barriers, and I always get a lot of feedback when I do eco-printing videos and I use these. So I wanted to show you all what I use for plastic barriers. When something comes in the mail, inevitably wrapped in plastic, you'll see it has these words and stickers and things all over it. This plastic is perfect for eco-printing barriers. I just cut off the words because I don't want those to transfer onto the ink, to transfer onto the fiber. And I just use this plastic. So I'm not using single-use plastic. I'm not buying plastic to use. It's recycled. It would have just had to go into the recycling or garbage anyways. So this is the kind of plastic that I like to use for eco-printing barriers. I have a whole drawer full. And so you can see these have been used so many times, or maybe you can't see. They're very wrinkly, they're not in perfect shape, so if I used a brand new piece of plastic wrap or something, I might get clearer prints. I'm just not that concerned with it. I'd rather have the earth in mind and try to be as sustainable as possible versus getting the most perfect clear prints. Got a towel just in case, some gloves for handling the iron, my very dirty rods you can see, or maybe you can't, I don't know if y'all can see. These have iron and such all over them. If you're worried about that transferring, because it will transfer, you can wrap your rods in plastic also before rolling them. I have got some old medical elastic bandages that I like to wrap my prints in. I talk all about this in my eco-printing tutorial. Some clips to bind them. Then I have my 3 pieces of fiber, my target pieces of fiber. So I've got, I like to work with cellulose fibers. Silk eco-prints beautifully. I've also found that bamboo silk eco-prints beautifully. So I've got 2 pieces of bamboo silk here that you can see are very white, and I'll bring you closer so you can see. These were mordanted using my process that I share exclusively in my natural dye course that left no color behind. This here is another piece of bamboo silk that was mordanted with tannin and aluminum salt, so you can see it's this yellowy tan color, which is totally okay because this is the piece we're going to be using an iron blanket on. We're trying to get that purpley effect in the background. The difference between the white and the tan that was treated with tannin, these two have not been treated with tannin. All right, so to start, I'm going to just go ahead and get my blankets soaking. I put my blankets directly into the iron and dye dry. I want all the moisture to come from either the iron or the dye, so I don't want to pre-soak it in water and then have that be diluted. So I'm going to stick this directly in, dry fiber, straight into my iron water, and let that soak for a bit. So we're also doing an iron dip on one of the pieces of fiber that wasn't treated with tannin, so I'm going to stick that in as well, and that is damp. All of my target fibers start damp, but very minimally. You don't want to be able to squeeze any excess water out. Then I'm going to take my matter blankets and stick them straight into the matter dye. And I'm going to let those have a good soak as well. Like I mentioned, there are so many variations, there are so many possibilities. Some people let theirs only soak for a few seconds. I let mine soak for about a minute. It just depends on what you've experimented with and what you're trying to achieve. And nothing is right or wrong. It's all about the process and about figuring out what works well for you. My methods might look different from other teachers' methods, but this is what works for me. I'll start with this piece. I'm gonna move these over here. And now I'm just going to be laying my flowers down, arranging them how I want. I'm going to dry them the stems so there's not a lot of excess moisture on there. All right, so I'm going to take out my iron piece, got my target piece, and my blanket, and just really squeeze them out both very good. I don't want any excess moisture in there. Go ahead and lay that piece out as well. So here's my target piece of fiber that I soaked in iron. And here's my iron blanket. And since I've already arranged my flowers over here, I can just go ahead and set this straight down. And there are some prints. This is a piece of fiber I used as an iron blanket previously. So there's some really light prints on here. They could transfer. I'm not really worried about it. So just going to lay this straight down on top. Of my target piece of my flowers. So I have made a sandwich. Okay, and so I just want to peek at this. This is amazing. It's like this immediate reaction that happens, but you can already see the purple happening. Okay, I'm going to arrange the flowers onto my iron treated piece of fiber real quickly. Coreopsis are one of my all-time favorite dye flowers. They are relatively color fast for a flower. They just make the most beautiful prints. They make beautiful oranges that can be shifted to browns, that can be shifted to rust with iron, and they are extremely prolific where I live here in Texas. They grow as a wildflower. I also grow them in my dye garden just because they're so wonderful. I'll have some Coreopsis seeds for sale, so if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, do so, because my newsletter recipients will be the first to find out about seed sales this fall. Okay, I'm done with my iron water. I'm gonna move it because it's in the way. Now I'm gonna move on to my matter blankets. So the same holds true with my matter blanket as it did with my iron blanket. I'm going to squeeze as much moisture out of it as possible. Having excess moisture is only going to muddle and blur your prints. And if you wanted to get really fancy and experiment, you could even lay a matter blanket on top of the iron blanket over here to see what results you get there. I'm not going to do that today. I want to show you the straight tan and iron reaction, but it's a fun thing to play around with. I should be wearing gloves probably if I don't want pink hands, but I'm so used to having dyed hands at this point that I don't really care. Now I did pre-measure these blankets out. You want them to be roughly the same size as the piece that you're dyeing. If they're smaller than the piece you're dyeing, then you're obviously going to have inconsistencies in the coloration. So because this is also fabric that's been used before as a matter blanket, there are prints on this too that could transfer. Again, I'm just not concerned with that. Just going to lay this flat right on top. So, and we will do the same for the next. All right, so got this one wrung out. Also, so this piece is a bit smaller than my target piece, thinner. I might have actually mixed those two, but that's okay. So we got that, like, pretty good. Got purple hands. How pretty is that though? Wow. I mean, that's an incredible color. From a plant, from a root. I cannot wait to harvest my own madder root. All right, so now we're going to put our plastic barriers down. This has a bit of madder on it from previous. That's probably going to transfer over here, but I've kind of found that when you have experimented a lot and you know what to expect from certain results, it's almost exciting and more fun to do something like that where you might get a little transfer of color and the results might not just be so predictable. That's just where I am in my stage of my journey, but I enjoy that. So you can see my plastic barriers are a little big. You can just fold them over, no big deal. I'm not super picky when it comes to that. Some people want them to be the exact size. You can just cut them down in that case. The plastic will stick to itself when you roll it, but it will unstick also. So going to take my dirty dowel rod and roll up our first print here. Take one of my elastic bandages. I can never gracefully do this on camera. It never fails. When no one's watching, I feel like I do it so much more gracefully. There's string wrapped around this one. Okay, let's try that again. Seeing such a strong reaction take place between this madder and the iron soaked target fabric already. This might be a really dark print. Just be interesting to see. You see what I mean? I can't do this gracefully while y'all are watching. Haha, okay. I explain all about why I like to use these bandages in my How to Eco Print video. Do you see what I mean? Okay, y'all. Silly. I'm just gonna wrap it all the way around. You don't have to use a bandage. You can use a piece of fabric. You can use string. You can use what you got. Take a safety pin and just pop it through the end to secure it. So many of you have gotten back to me and said that the bandage has changed your eco printing, and that's just so happy to me because this was just a random thought that I had. I tried to use just like elastic at first that you buy, like a wide elastic, and that was kind of a nightmare. All right, so we're gonna roll up our second one, and my barrier was a little bit big there, so I just folded it right over. Safety pin, stick it right in to secure. Ready to go. Okay, last but not least is our iron guy, looking very irony over here. So he's got spots. It's gonna be very interesting. So just gonna give it a roll. You can even see, can you see? I need a camera person. So I'm discovering. Roll that one up. And finish rolling. Looking good. I'm having the hardest time today getting the camera right, y'all. I'm still pinning this. I noticed my head was cut off and I was crooked. Now we got our 3 bundles and I'm gonna stick them in the steamer. Flowers do not need very long to steam. I will steam these probably about 10 minutes maximum, especially coreopsis. They give their color really easily. When you're eco printing with leaves, they need much longer time to steam. So these are quick and easy, and they really readily give their color. So I took these out after about 10 minutes and rolled one to see. I like to just peek at the flower prints just to see what's going on. And I realized I used the wrong madder bath. So I'm actually not mad. I'm really glad this happened because in the beginning of the video, I showed you those examples of what it looks like to use an exhausted madder bath. This was not an exhausted madder bath. And I kind of thought that when I was bringing the target cloth out. I thought, wow, that looks really dark. But I just went with it, and it's actually pretty cool because now you get to see what happens when you use a strong dye bath as a carrier cloth. So it's all fun, it's all part of the process. It is, it's interesting to see. Here's our first bundle, and I think I'm actually gonna bring you over so you can see. So it's always fun when something like this happens on camera. It actually makes me really glad. It allows me to show you a different result than I was planning to. Especially because I've already shown you these, and this is kind of what we were going to be achieving today. So just again, this is a print that I made with coreopsis in an exhausted madder bath, which is what I thought we were going to be doing today, with an iron dip. So this has had an iron dip, and then I laid the coreopsis down and put the blanket that was soaked in exhausted madder root, so very weak madder root dye. And this was the print that I made without dipping in iron. It just had been mordanted and then had the blanket laid on top of it with the exhausted madder root. This is using a full strength madder root dye as a blanket. And I mean, it's just so pretty, you guys. The colors are intense. The discharge stems, it's awesome. And so you see this speckling with that's also, I've noticed when I let my fibers steam for less time, I don't get the clear backgrounds like I did on the first two pieces I showed you. And it also has something to do with the moisture content of the target fabric when the blanket goes on and the moisture content of the blanket. This was just the madder blanket. And so madder shifts to be kind of purpley with alkaline conditions, so that's what's going on here. It'll be cool to wash this and see what happens. But I mean, that color, wow, so cool. Okay, here we've got the tannin mordanted piece of fiber that had the iron blanket. So you can see that. There weren't any big surprises here. And the iron blanket for that one with the madder dripped on it. Okay, and here we have the piece of mordanted fiber that was dipped in iron before the flowers were laid on it. The print is so cool. Sometimes I feel like when I'm showing pieces, often I feel like the camera just can't do it justice. Doesn't pick up on what it's like in real life. So this is a really strong madder blanket with that. And here's the iron blanket, and now this is just so purple. There's just so many colors dancing on this piece of fabric. It's amazing. I love it. So there you have it. So now you have seen what it looks like when you use a exhausted dye or a really weak dye for your blanket, what it's like when you use a really strong dye for your blanket. Obviously the prints are not gonna pop as much if you have a strong color in the background. I really prefer using a weak dye for the blanket because I love that contrast of the prints popping, but this is also really beautiful too. So it just depends again on what you're looking for, what you like, and now you've seen both. Results are also gonna depend on what kind of fiber you're using. Like you can see with this shirt that I've printed here, it's a ribbed cotton. The prints don't look super neat. it just varies from fiber to fiber. So a lot of variables to play with, and there's a lot to have fun with. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for supporting my work. I hope that you all enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments below or hop on over to Instagram where you can find me at The Barefoot Dyer. I hope that you all have a really great day.